Japan's secret weapon that killed its own soldiers. On the morning of August 18, 1940, deep inside Japanese-occupied Manchuria, a guarded military compound outside Harbin came to life. Armed sentries of the Kwantung Army took their posts as scientists in white coats passed through steel doors sealed from the outside world. Inside those walls, Imperial Japan believed it was building the future of warfare. Not a bomb, not a tank, not an aircraft, but a weapon that could move unseen, strike silently, and kill without warning. What Japanese commanders did not yet understand, what little did they know, was that this weapon would soon escape their control. And when it did, it would not distinguish between enemy and ally. By the end of the war, this secret weapon would kill thousands of civilians, devastate entire regions, and turn back on Japan's own soldiers. This is the story of Unit 731 and the biological weapon that became one of the most dangerous failures in military history. By the late 1930s, Imperial Japan stood at a crossroads. The invasion of China in 1937 had dragged into a grinding, resource-draining conflict. Japanese forces controlled major cities, but guerrilla resistance continued across vast rural areas. Casualties mounted, supplies ran thin. At the same time, Japan faced growing threats on all sides. To the north, the Soviet Union massed armored divisions in Siberia. To the east, the United States Navy expanded across the Pacific, and Japan's industrial base simply could not match the output of its potential enemies. Japanese military planners understood one brutal truth. If war came against a major power, Japan could not win a long, conventional conflict, so they looked for another path, a shortcut to victory. Within the upper ranks of the Imperial Japanese Army, a radical idea gained traction, one championed by a charismatic and deeply unsettling man, Major General Shiro Ishii. Ishii was a medical doctor by training, a bacteriologist, and a fierce nationalist. He believed modern war would be decided not by firepower, but by science. Bullets kill soldiers, Ishii reportedly told his superiors. Disease kills armies. In 1936, with the personal backing of senior officers in the Kwantung Army, Ishii was granted full authority to create Japan's most secret weapons program. It would be known only by a number, Unit 731. Unit 731 was constructed near Pingfang, outside Harbin, far from foreign observers. Officially, it was listed as a water purification and epidemic prevention unit. In reality, it was a self-contained research city. More than 150 buildings, high fences topped with barbed wire, guard towers manned by armed soldiers, crematoriums operating day and night. Inside, Ishii assembled a team of Japan's top medical minds, doctors, surgeons, microbiologists, many fresh from elite universities. What happened next would become legendary for all the wrong reasons. Prisoners were brought in from across occupied territories, Chinese civilians, Korean laborers, Soviet POWs, even captured resistance fighters. They were not called prisoners, they were called maruta, logs, and logs were expendable. Experiments began immediately. Subjects were deliberately infected with Yersinia pestis, the bacteria that causes plague. Others were exposed to cholera, typhoid, dysentery, and anthrax. Doctors recorded symptoms with clinical detachment, high fever, swollen lymph nodes, internal hemorrhaging. To study frostbite, prisoners were taken outside in winter temperatures reaching -30 degrees Celsius. Their limbs were soaked in water and left to freeze solid, then smashed with sticks to hear the sound of ice cracking inside human flesh. Vivisections were performed without anesthesia. The purpose was not cruelty for its own sake, it was data. Ishii's ultimate goal was battlefield deployment. By 1939, Unit 731 had moved beyond the laboratory. The next step was testing these weapons under real combat conditions. Japanese biological weapons were designed to be delivered in several ways. Ceramic bombs filled with plague infected fleas, contaminated food supplies, poisoned wells and rivers. In 1940, field tests began in occupied regions of Zhejiang and Henan provinces. Japanese aircraft from the Kwantung Air Service flew low over rural villages, releasing their payloads. There were no explosions, no warning sirens, just insects drifting down into homes, marketplaces, and rice fields. Within days, entire communities were sick. Within weeks, thousands were dead. From a military standpoint, the results appeared promising. Enemy-held areas depopulated, resistance collapsed. But then reports began arriving from Japanese units stationed nearby. By 1400, medical officers noted unusual symptoms among their own men: high fevers, severe vomiting, painful swelling in the groin and armpits. At first, commanders suspected poor sanitation, but the numbers kept rising. By nightfall, dozens of Japanese soldiers were incapacitated. By morning, some were dead. The weapon had begun to turn. In October 1940, a Kwantung Army infantry regiment operating near Ningbo reported catastrophic losses without enemy contact. Entire platoons were rendered combat ineffective in less than a week. Doctors confirmed the unthinkable: plague. The same disease Japan had unleashed on the enemy had spread back into its own ranks. Fleas did not respect front lines. Wind patterns shifted. Water flowed downstream. Infected rodents moved freely. For 3 brutal hours, regimental commanders debated whether to report the outbreak. Admitting the truth meant acknowledging the existence of a forbidden weapon. But then the crisis was impossible to hide. Field hospitals overflowed. The stench of sickness hung in the air. Soldiers who had survived artillery barrages now lay helpless, delirious with fever, begging medics for water that could no longer save them. Against impossible odds, medical teams attempted quarantines. It failed. In some sectors, Japanese units were ordered to abandon newly captured territory, not because of enemy counterattack, but because disease had made continued occupation impossible. The weapon had achieved the ultimate betrayal. It had weakened Japan's own army. By 1942, senior commanders recognized a terrifying reality. Biological weapons could not be controlled. They could not be recalled once deployed. They did not obey orders. Shiro Ishii argued the failures were due to improper handling, not the concept itself. He pushed for larger-scale production, improved delivery systems, and faster deployment. But resistance grew within the ranks. Officers who had watched their men die from invisible infection began to question everything. In secret memoranda, some commanders warned the continued use risked catastrophic blowback. Still, research continued. Japan even planned biological attacks against the United States, including proposals to release plague-carrying insects over San Diego via submarine-launched aircraft. Those plans were never executed, not because of moral restraint, but because the war situation deteriorated too quickly. By 1944, Japan was fighting for survival, and Unit 731 was running out of time. As Soviet forces prepared to invade Manchuria in August 1945, Unit 731 received its final orders: destroy everything. Laboratories were demolished, records were burned, remaining prisoners were executed. Shiro Ishii fled, carrying only what knowledge he could salvage. After the war, many expected war crimes trials. They never came. Instead, in a chilling act of Cold War pragmatism, the United States offered immunity to Unit 731 scientists in exchange for their data. Men responsible for unimaginable suffering returned to civilian life. Some became respected doctors, others became university professors. A few rose to prominence in Japan's medical establishment. The victims received no justice, no memorials were built. For decades, the story was officially denied. Yet the legacy remains. Unit 731 demonstrated a truth the world could not ignore. Biological weapons are uniquely dangerous, not because of their power alone, but because of their unpredictability. They turn battlefields into epidemics epidemics. They transform soldiers into victims. They make entire populations targets. And sometimes they kill the very people who create them. Japan's secret weapon was meant to secure victory. Instead, it exposed the limits of human control over nature itself. Fear gripped the men who unleashed it. Suffering followed wherever it spread, and its shadow lingers to this day. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to WWII Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.